Good morning, good afternoon, good day, good night to all our little Booleans out there. How are you all doing?
Is that how we're calling our listeners?
Yeah, they're the bulls. Nah, I don't like that. Because I said it, that just sounded like the bulls. Like the animal, the bulls. We got to think of a name. Submit the name
Chicago
we need to call
Bulls.
the community. The Chicago Bulls. Anyway, welcome to another episode of Live Booleans. We have a great episode with an old lecturer of mine, the founder, owner, and instructor at CDW Studios and CDW Animation, Simon Scales.
Awesome conversation. Lots of like a good understanding of what motivated Simon to create CDW from his roots as a concept artist, which was really cool to hear. The kind of experience that he had and how that shaped the kind of studio and learning studio that he's created. He's like really trying to emulate that kind of experience, which is really, really cool.
And as I was just saying to you before, we talk about in the podcast, like CDW, if you're listening to this and you have been to CDW or you've graduated from CDW or you're currently in CDW, maybe you're in the study room where I used to be. Maybe you're also doing a 2D class and realized you're more cut out for 3D, like I was. It's a place like no other. And I implore the students who are listening now, who are at CDW, really appreciate kind of what's going on there right now, because once you leave, it's harder to find a feeling like that of just being around all these creatives at the same time. You're working to something, you're being held accountable. Accountability and artists are very tricky. It's really great. So talking to Simon about, as Costa said, how he started the studio. How do you, get an artist to share your work? How do you build a portfolio if you're looking to get into industry? What is important? Here's the clickbait title for that. The one thing employers look for. We have that. We have that from the man himself. We talk about, why the teaching is different at CDW as opposed to traditional universities. And then we get into CDW Animation and the plans that CDW has. Didn't it just get you excited, Costa?
It did, yeah. And even the future of both CDW and also, Simon shares his thoughts on. He has a really good kind of. We had a really good conversation around AI and the tools the kind of AI tools like DALLE and all these other ones that are being used, and how that impacts an artist's workflow going forward, and how it traditionally other tools have impacted and changed the landscape of art and the workflow there. So yeah, really good analogy. It was a really cool opinion from someone so well respected and so talented as well to hear his opinion on that.
Yeah, so without further ado, cue us in, John, and here is Simon Scales. All right, Simon, I would love to, if you could, how do you go from concept artist at the studios you were at the start to then instructor to then opening your own studio? What does that process look like?
Well, I think it started, it probably started back when I was at university. So basically I went to uni here in Adelaide and did a course, and, it was okay, but it was sort of just pretty standard, kind of university course. And I started out as a children's book illustrator and did that for quite some time. And then I wanted to get into video games, and at the time I didn't really know how to do it. I wanted to just do video game concept art. And so I met a friend online, back in the day when blogs were a thing, and he said, "Oh, I'm teaching a class at this school in LA," and at the time I was thinking about going to Noman School. I was thinking of going there, but then it turned out he was teaching at a place called Concept Design Academy. So I ended up sort of going from Adelaide to LA and studying over there for a while at the Concept Design Academy. And I kind of didn't really know it at the time, but I was sort of like the first international student that they had at that school. And it's run by a guy called Kevin Chen. And basically he kind of really took me under his wing, and I got an experience that was very different to anyone else that's sort of come afterwards. So, his wife kind of took care of me and would make dinners, and I'd be around their house all the time and all this kind of stuff. So it was a really unique opportunity. And then, when I came back to Adelaide, I worked on my portfolio for a while, and then I got into video games. So I applied for a job, and that was at THQ, working on the Blob games, way back in the day. And then from there, I went on and worked for a couple other game studios, and then I worked for Lego for quite a while, for like a couple of years, sort of Lego headquarters, doing all sorts of things for movies and TV shows and boxes and all that kind of stuff. And then I just really wanted to do something that just kind of gave people the opportunity that I had going over to the States. But obviously a lot of people at that time, couldn't afford to go over to the States and, sort of uproot their lives and do all that sort of thing. So I thought about just doing a workshop. So I rang up Kevin Chen, who owned the Concept Design Academy, and I said, "Kevin, I'm thinking about doing a workshop. Would you come out to Australia and do it?" He was like, "Yeah, of course." And once sort of I had Kevin on board, then I got a couple of other people from the Concept Design Academy school, and they came to Adelaide and we ran a workshop, and I had no idea how it was going to go. We had like about 60 tickets, and it was a full 2-week event from 9 a.m. until 9 p.m. every day. Everyone got sick because it was completely insane, batshit crazy. Just like, it was like, 14 hours a day, every day for 2 weeks. But everyone had like an amazing time. And the event completely sold out, which was super cool. So then we held a workshop in Melbourne, and then Sydney, and then Wellington in New Zealand. And it was kind of like at that point in time that people were just asking to do more of this. They were just like, "Oh, it'd be cool if there was something more full-time, more just doing this all of the time." I'm like, okay. And then so it just kind of turned into a school. I literally had no intention of like starting a school. That wasn't my intention. My intention was just to do some workshops to, get cool artists out and like help people kind of see the process of things that I got to go sort of see in America. And then, it just snowballed. So I think when the very first, semester that we ran classes, we had 4 night classes in a week. That was it. So we had myself, Nick Peel and Tim McBurney teaching classes, and it was just us 3. And then, this semester, I think we've got like 75 classes a week.
Wow.
So, it's within, so that was in 2012 when, we kind of, 2011 was the first workshops. 2012 was when we opened the school. And then, so in the space of 10 years, we've kind of, it's grown quite a bit. And I think now we've got between sort of like 300 and 400 students, in the Flinders University CDW Studios Visual Effects and Entertainment Design degree. We're just launching a new campus in Melbourne and Sydney that's going to be opening next year, so opening in February. So, we're looking to build those campuses out as well. Just taking over Australia. But that's, once again, no intention of doing any of that. But it's just sort of evolved. And I think that, people are studying, elsewhere in Australia and maybe not getting the education that they should be getting or that they're desiring to get. And, we think that, we can do a really good job of the kind of, that the instruction side of things in all areas of VFX and trying to open that up to more areas of Australia just to build everything, and really trying to like, rather than sort of like, have different areas, we kind of want to try and work out a way to meld it all together. So everyone's kind of learning all the same stuff and creating that community together to really, build and grow the school and create like ultimately, what I want for everyone is just to get jobs in the industry. You know, that's why I started it. Originally, it was just to so people could learn how to do concept art, you know, and get jobs doing that. And now it's spread out to concept art and, you know, visual effects, 3D, you know, 3D animation, all of those kind of areas, which is really cool.
And it's an experience like no other. Especially now that I say now, it's been a few years since you've been partnered with Flinders University. And I wonder if you working in those studios previously in America and around the place kind of influenced the way you deliver the courses. Because I always remember, one of the classes I did with you was it wasn't the matte painting, it was like the photo bashing class, and I'm terrible at the 2D art. But I always remember your teaching style was you would find something that you really liked about someone's work and focus on that. And it made me feel at least less like a student and like as an actual artist, like someone giving feedback on their work. So I wonder if that's from your studio experience, like having how you deliver feedback to a student. What do you find your approach to feedback with artists or feedback to students?
Yeah, well, I mean, you don't want to just – there might be times in my brain where I'm like, hey, Alex, this is really not very good and I don't know what to tell you right now. But we can't – you know, I don't want to say that. So you know, it's always about, you know, trying to find the positive and you know, ultimately, like I've seen people just go from 0 to 1,000. I've seen people come in and they're at, you know, 500 and they kind of get to 520. Like it's just – everyone's very different in the way they learn, the way they kind of approach stuff, and you know, for me, it's about trying to work out, you know, how to help make someone better, right? How to help them connect with what they're doing, how to help them want to learn this stuff. I feel like for a long time in Australia, we had a very sort of dim view on education in terms of like you just do your university course and then like, oh, I'm done. Nothing more to learn. I just go and I'm a master of everything now and I just go and do my job and never learn anything else. But definitely when I went over to LA, it was crazy. Like there's a very different, they have a very different learning experience over there. So for example, like in my classes, you know, I sat down next to this guy and it's like, he's like, hey, my name's Steve. I'm Simon, you know, best buddies straight away kind of thing. And then, you know, a few weeks later, I find out that it's Stephen Platt and he was storyboarding on the movie Iron Man. And when I was like about 19, I used to read his comics because he's a comic book artist. Wow. And comic book artist turned storyboard artist. And he used to do this. He did a comic called Soul Saga, I think it was called. And yeah, I used to buy it and stuff. And I was literally like sitting next to him in the class. I didn't realize for ages actually that it was his comic. He brought in his portfolio one day and he was showing the stuff. I'm like, holy shit! I really I know this stuff. Like, what is this? And then he's like, oh yeah, this is my comic, like Soul Saga. I'm like, what? And yeah, by then we'd kind of become pretty good friends. I was like, no way! I've literally got like copies of this at home and stuff. And yeah, so that was kind of funny. But like, there was guys like that doing classes. You know, and I was like, what is going on here? Because, you know, in Australia, it's like you didn't do that. You just sort of went to uni and then it's obviously changed a bit now, right? But you know, and I think that's something that I want to kind of cultivate with people is that, you know, it's a journey. It's a lifelong journey and a passion, you know, of doing art, whichever, you know, in whichever area it is. And, you know, it's not, you don't just turn 22 and you stop learning. It's like it's you do it forever kind of thing. So and it's about kind of just trying to help people find that passion and sort of get on board with that way of thinking, because I think that makes them like a really good artist in the long run.
Yeah, it's meant to be real different, isn't it? The even like if you were to get work in the studios over there, the amount of education required as opposed to the like. Because our degrees naturally go for 3 years unless you do honors. And is it like American studios request 4 years or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's not necessarily just for working in it. Like, that's not necessarily just Americans working in America. Like, it'd be the same here. Whereas if you got a killer portfolio, you get a job when you're 19 if you're good enough. You know, it's not necessarily about that. But in terms of getting visas to go over to America from Australia. That's where you need the 4-year kind of degree. That really does help. It really speeds up the process and makes it a lot easier. You can still get over to America if you don't have like a degree or do honors or whatever. It just makes it harder, just makes it more difficult. But yeah, it's something we do promote a lot at CDW, which is do the degree, do the honors, because then that opens up your visa opportunities. And we've had a lot of anecdotal evidence from people that have gone that pathway, getting overseas, that they're like, yeah, all the students that, do the honors, it makes it like a lot easier. So yeah, it's just something to think about.
Yeah, sure. And another thing with the CDW approach, and I also wondered while I was there if this was a product of the connections you had made in your time in the studios, was you always have masterclasses from, industry professionals. That's one thing as well, is all the tutors, if I'm correct, not tutors, sorry, instructors are all industry, they're working in industry. And then you run these masterclasses and like you have these posters up on the wall of, they're almost like superheroes, of like Jamie Jones' work and things like that. Mm-hmm. And it breeds this kind of culture of, you go like you want to know these names and you want to learn more. How did those come about? Was that a product of the studio work?
Yeah, just a culmination of everything, I guess. Going over to that school in America and then, working in studios, you just kind of get to know people and become friends with people. And then, and once you know a few people, then they introduce you to other people, and it just kind of snowballs. And yeah, I don't really feel like there's probably, every sort of artist going around that, I've got some sort of connection to them somehow. And can kind of, get them out to masterclasses and do all those sorts of things. And in general, people are nice. They want to help other people. They want to do a masterclass and show what they're doing and inspire students to want to, follow their path or learn different stuff. So yeah, it's normally not too tough a sell, especially when we had people like pre-COVID coming out to Australia. Once again, not really a tough sell. Hey, come out to Australia for a couple of weeks and and do some art. Like it's normally the answer is yes. Yeah, but we have had some of the best people in the world out to CDW, which has been really cool. So yeah.
Did you have a lot of challenges with COVID in terms of taking your teaching remote and all that? I
think we already kind of did a lot of stuff streaming wise. So in actual fact, it wasn't very much of a challenge for us really. It was more just logistics and timetabling, things like that. But in terms of just doing stuff online, we kind of were already doing that. Like we used to just back up all of our stuff on YouTube and every class. So I was just like, oh, now we just make that live instead of a backup. So which was kind of cool. And it does go to show, like, I think this sort of industry works pretty well online, is just in general. I definitely have got thoughts about learning live and online. I think that learning in person I really see a different improvement in students. Like people that do it online tend to improve a lot slower than people that do it in person. Yeah. There's something about, one, it's the accountability of being there. And the other thing is, I think just seeing people around you, it creates this culture, and you can you actually learn a lot from your fellow students, right? Like just what they're doing. And if you're both sitting in a room remotely, it's like you can't like sneak a look at what they're working on. You know what I mean? And I actually think you learn, half as much from that as you do just from the class content. So yeah.
Yeah, because if you're working from home or something, it's insular. Like if you're wanting to get into games, that's all you're thinking about. But if you go to an art school, you're sitting next to someone who's doing the same course as you, but they're doing it to do CG in films, or like I wouldn't have even known matte painting was a thing until way too late if it wasn't for sitting next to someone at CDW,
Yeah, that's right. It's just that it's kind of it's interesting to see the things that you learn and grow from, within that environment, right? It's not stuff you can just be like, oh yeah, you'll do this and this. It's kind of organic stuff, right? It's just and it's making friends, and all the whole thing is like, certainly I think when you come to CDW and Flinders in this course, it's everyone's into the same stuff. Like it's not hard to make friends because you kind of like, oh, you like art, you like drawing, or you like 3D modeling. Oh, I do too. So it is funny how like you wouldn't think certain types of people get along, but it's like everyone's got a common interest, I guess, if they're kind of here. So you sort of you miss out on a bit of that with COVID stuff that's been going on and doing stuff remotely. But yeah, we're always trying to work out ways to stop that from happening.
And moving into CG art and everything like that. Like obviously you started off more concept art, and then growing CDW out to CG and everything else VFX. Was that demand from just like you saw that as something that was lacking, or was there other things? And was there challenges with kind of moving into those spaces?
Yeah, so we definitely started out as just, doing 2D stuff like concept art and all of those sorts of things. We're getting into like 2D animation and storyboarding, and I think it was just naturally that we were like, oh, we should do 3D stuff, and that kind of happened, and we sort of built out the 3D, and now we're sort of really trying to build out the VFX and 3D animation side of things as well. Because, once again, I think having those industry people, teach in the same way that we had been in the past is really like, once again, accelerating students' like learning kind of abilities and pathways into getting into the industry. We're already seeing like we don't have crazy numbers in the animation and VFX streams at the moment, but all of those students are getting jobs just because there's so many jobs in those areas at the moment.
Even in Adelaide, right? With all the companies that we have here, that relative to the population that we have, it must be like a bunch of opportunities for students.
Yeah, there's some areas where we actually can't train students up fast enough. Like it's just it's such a huge area of growth at the moment, which is it's super exciting. I remember when I graduated uni, there was literally like one job, and there was like 20 people all like just piling on top trying to like get that job. But now it's just not like that now. There's so many opportunities, and there's so many different parts. It's not, you don't just have to get into a studio either. There's all these different, you do Patreon, you could do, I don't know, NFTs, you could do, whatever, right? Like there's all these different areas and pathways you can do. You can go to conventions and sell your art there. Like that was never even a thing when I was sort of coming out. It's just, you do 3D prints and, like there's so much stuff you can do now. So it's super cool.
Do you think we've caught up to where the experience that you had when you were in the US, or do you think, we still have ways to go before we get to that kind of, community and experience?
Yeah, I think it's definitely catching up. I mean, I guess because of the stuff that CDW is doing that didn't exist before, and now it's a thing, which is very similar to what I experienced in the States. So I think it's it's good and bad. I think it's made stuff that happens overseas like less enticing now, like because it's kind of like, oh, well, I can just be in Adelaide and do that. I actually don't. It was kind of weird. There was a time where like lots of people were going over to CDA, like they're going from Australia over to the States to do that because they sort of saw the pathway that I was doing and then, kind of wanted to do that as well. But I've noticed like that's really slowed down now. There's not as many people do that because obviously, kind of getting a whole university degree here that's doing all the same kind of stuff. So, it's definitely, the gap is closing. And I think because so much stuff's online now as well, like, you can be 13 years old and you can know what concept art is, I mean, I didn't know what concept art was until I was like 20 something, it's that type of thing. Like literally when I was, 17, 18, 19, the only way you would see this stuff was in books, is in like the art of book, or maybe a DVD might have like a, special features bit at the end or something, or Disney movies that was, but now it's just like you just type in like, digital art into YouTube and away you go. So it is very it's very surreal kind of what's happening. It's crazy. But it's making the entire level, like I was talking to students about this the other day, like the entry level has completely changed. So like when I was coming through, it was like, oh, can you, not can you hold a pencil, but it was like if we saw ArtStation 20 years ago, it would have been like, oh, okay, that's pretty like lame. Whereas now, you look at ArtStation, and the level that's on the front page there is like super high, and that's kind of what's expected of students graduating. So the level has really changed, but but now you can get Gumroads and you can go on YouTube and you can do all these other things to learn stuff. So it's just really revolutionizing the whole industry. It's making everything better. Like movies are just looking better and better and better, like all the time. Games are as well, right? So it's just it's
Has that been a challenge for you? Like I know a lot of larger university things like that. Like they struggle a lot with these new kind of courses that pop up online, like through Gumroad and all these other things. Like has that been like a challenge for CDW at all?
Not really, just because of the way the instructors that we have and the way we kind of do it, we can be very nimble in terms of what we teach and how we teach it. So we like to think we're always kind of teaching, kind of the current things, the current industry trends, because we're all total art nerds. So like whatever's coming out, we're into, I've been playing around with the AI stuff and nice. All those sorts of things, and all the guys are into Blender and have every add-on under the sun, and then all the 3D guys are always using all the different tools and tricks and everything that goes with the industry. And I think part of teaching is you have to teach students that that's a thing, right? You have to almost teach people of like, you actually have to learn this stuff by yourself. Like you have to teach someone how to learn it by themselves, if that makes sense. It's like, hey, that you've got Google there and you can type this in and it will pop up,
And that's always something that you see like a lot of students fall over in other more traditional kind of universities and that sort of stuff. Like, they're expected like to just do the course content and then that's it, like not go out and explore on their own. Do you find students just naturally do that because they've come to CDW like with a huge, immense passion for art?
Yeah, and I think also we're telling them to do that as well. And then it's definitely like, I think that was the thing when I went over to LA. I was like, people were like hungry for this stuff, like they were really pushing to learn. And what I took from that was like, you need to do that to get to those levels, to be like working on those Hollywood movies. You have to push yourself really hard, and you have to strive to be really, really good, right?
Yeah,
and you can't do that by just doing things half-assed. So
that's right.
Yeah, but it's hard.
I definitely see it even. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, like my nephew. He's only 15. Sorry, not my nephew. My cousin. He's 15, and he's concepting already. He's been concepting for 2 years, and I think he's just finished one of the CDW courses through. I can't remember what it was, like the kind of like he's in year 11 or year 10, and he's done it through his school, or whatever. And it's like,
yeah, cool.
It's it's really raised the bar for him, like, and to have access to that, like that's phenomenal, because he wouldn't have seen it. So yeah, it's definitely see it like in the younger people, and it'll kind of raise the bar of the entry, like you mentioned.
Yep. Yeah, no, 100%.
What makes speaking to that of the employment opportunities, what makes a strong student or any portfolio of someone trying to break into the industry? Because it seems to be that no matter how talented an artist is, a lot of them are so scared to show anyone their work. What can you see as like the strengths? Is it better to have, like a varied portfolio of, different styles, or is it better to hone in on one? Do you need a lot of works or just a few strong pieces? What have you seen?
I think the problem is it just varies so wildly, right? I feel like the number one thing, if someone wants to do this for a job, is really the drive and the passion is the most important thing, right? It's the wanting to do it. I tell my students, I've got a kind of a silly analogy, but I think it's a good one, is that we all kind of went through school and we know someone that like got drafted, into an AFL team or something, right? At every school, there's that one kid that plays football and they're really good, right? And I say to my students, so like, let's kind of relate that back to drawing, right? So I'd be like, how many times do you think, John Smith has kicked a football between the time that they're, 2 and get drafted to the AFL team? I'm like, I ask students, how many times? Some will be like 1,000, some will be like, 1,000,000, some will be like 100,000. I'm like, are you guys for real? I'm like, they've probably kicked the ball like, billions of times, right?
Mm.
And, someone will say like, yeah, little Johnny's so talented at football. It's like, well, yeah, because they do it all the time, right? So, I'm like, okay, well, let's go draw a spaceship. So, if I get you to draw one spaceship, it's like, it might be okay, whatever. If we just get everyone to do one now, it's like everyone will have varying degrees of a spaceship. But if you draw that same spaceship 100 times, do you think the 101st drawing is going to be better than the first drawing, right?
Mm.
Of course it's going to be, and that's the talent part. Like the talent part is actually like you wanting to do it, right? That's what the talent is. Yeah, it's yes, people definitely see the world a bit differently. There's certain people that see colors really, just can visualize those things really well. There's certain people that see stuff in 3D really well.
Mhm.
Some people can turn things in their head, spin them around and then kind of draw them or model them or whatever. And some people can't do that. So there's different levels of that type of stuff. But in terms of the kind of like raw talent and desire and drive to do things, I think it is just the wanting to do it, right? And then the doing it is the hard part. And then that then leads to, portfolios and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's just the main thing is just, having that drive to want to do it, because I think if you do, then you'll just make it. You will just force yourself to do it because you'll go the extra mile on everything, right? Because you enjoy doing it, and want to kind of get somewhere. But yeah, it's normally the people that they have a hard time getting out of first gear. They just it's like they like the idea of being a professional artist, but don't actually have the drive to do it. Does that sort of make sense? And that's one of the bits that you just can't teach. Right? It's just I can't make something like, I mean, I've tried. I mean, I slap people on the head sometimes, and just it's like you can't make people want to do the work or make people want to do get to that goal or whatever. So yeah, it's really interesting because I see it all the time. I see students that come in that are not very talented. So, and what I mean by that is like, I just think they haven't done a lot of drawing or a lot of modeling or whatever. They just haven't done a lot of it. But if they're really dedicated and they want to really do it, they'll get to where they want to go. So, yeah.
I think that football analogy is perfect because Costa and I have spoken about this before of how a lot of people, like if there's this notion of like, you just do it within suitable hours, like your work, and, that's fine. You need to balance it with the social life, and that stuff's important. But there's people who like live and breathe these things, and that's who you're going up against for the job. It feels like that kind of mentality of do it within reasonable hours is something you earn once you've passed that threshold of living and breathing it.
Yeah, 100%. I do. I do have a hard time connecting sometimes with students or people that sort of go like, oh, I'm feeling like burnt out, or I have like creative block, or like all this kind of stuff. I'm like, to me, when I'm doing art, it's literally the same as like eating ice cream. Like it has that, like it's just really something that I want to do, that whenever I'm doing it, it's in my happy place, and some people just kind of can't quite ever get like, kind of have that feeling or that vibe with art or whatever, whether it's animation or whatever it is. But definitely sort of, having that, just finding it fun and something that you're interested in doing. And that's why I love doing this stuff for a job, because it's like you kind of get to do your hobby and your passion like as a job, which can be tricky because sometimes it is hard to switch off and you're sort of doing it all the time. But yeah, definitely going back to, that whole experience in LA, I just met so many people where they literally like eat sleep, breathe, doing this stuff. And you can see why they're so good, because they just never stop. Just, yeah. No, maybe that has some bad side effects as well, but there's always a balance. But yeah.
It's funny you mention that, because I heard a quote from Mike Tyson, and he was like the opposite. He was like, he's like, people would think I love the gym. He's like, I've hated the gym my entire life. I hate the gym, but I just tricked myself into liking the gym, and then I love the gym. He just told himself, yeah, you like the gym.
Yeah, and I think it's like anything. The more you do it as well, there's a lot of like psychological stuff that goes on, right? It is kind of like, going running and going to the gym. It's like, people will say, I hate running, but it's like, you don't actually hate running. It's just you hate the hard work part of running, or the pain that it's going to, either the lactic acid that build, all that kind of stuff. It's like, you don't actually, you just, and then the more you do it, then you go like, oh, I'm actually enjoying running, or I'm enjoying going to the gym and working out. Like, yeah, we have a lot of these, we do a lot of things in life where it's the same brain stuff going on, right? We're pretty simple, how we work. Yeah. But, no, it is, and I feel like it's one of those things, like sort of, like art block and creative block. I feel like, once again, that's another thing with experiences. Like, you don't really have that anymore. It's like you go to work and you just do work, but I think it's a learned thing, right? It's an actual, you kind of learn how to deal with that stuff, and you learn how to get better at those things with practice and experience, right? So it's definitely something that can happen early on, but it's normally we associate it with the wrong thing, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the strength of the instructor is paramount. When I first started learning 3D, this was at a way different institution. The lecturer was just phoning it in, and like, I had the worst experience of my life, and thought, I'm never touching 3D again. And then got into all of this because I wanted to learn how to make the sky in the video game Mafia, and found out it was just a photo. But yeah, the value of the instructor, of how they can inspire you, is really important. That sets that whole tone.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's really cool, like, students just actually having, someone up the front of the class that is working in the industry, like actually doing it and getting paid for it. And like, hey, we're not making this up. It's we're actually doing this thing. You can do this as a job. I think that's a very, very kind of powerful thing. Yeah. And once again, that stems back to when I went over to LA, when I went to uni, they would just give you an assignment, right? And you would just, there was no help with that. It was just, here's the assignment and you go and do it. And then you would just sort of learn just at your own pace. But when I went over to the States, it was like, no, someone would sit up the front of the room and they would show you how to do the thing. Like, this is how you draw an apple. Do it like this. And then you would see how they do it. And the thing that I really learned is, like, it's literally just somebody up on the, up on the stage with, a pen or a Wacom tablet or whatever in their hand. They're actually doing that thing, like, in front of me. Because I think sometimes when you see it on the internet, you're almost like, I don't know how this magic happens. But when you kind of see someone doing it in front of you, it kind of pulls away that curtain a little bit, and you sort of start to realize, this is an achievable thing. Like, if Simon's doing this in front of me, like, I can learn how to do that too. You know what I mean? And it does kind of like, it does sort of make it a bit less scary, I think, which is really cool.
Absolutely, yeah. A few years ago, CDW, or was it 2 years ago? You launched CDW Animation, which feels like that was a long time coming. Because I'd seen your work on the IP Moonsinger. What's that process been like?
Yeah, a long process.
Yeah.
So I guess it's really just like it started out as just a little friends, just like myself and the other guys that had sort of spare time. We were just working on a little project, and then it's just sort of, gotten, kind of bigger and bigger over the years. And, now we sort of employ people specifically to work in the studio and all of those sorts of things. So, it's something that has always been it's always been something that I've sort of wanted to do, which is just start up a studio and have stuff in Adelaide that people can gain employment at, and then trying to make really cool content and projects. I mean, that's the thing that hopefully we can do, which is we're trying to work on our own IP, which is a pretty crazy thing to do. Certainly at the scope that we're trying to do it at. So at the moment we're trying to make a 3D animated TV series for Netflix, and to do that is not a simple thing, and it's pretty full on. And there's some moments where it's a bit scary, where it's like, oh man, can we actually do this? And we just kind of keep working through those scenarios and just meeting more people, and the project just keeps getting realer and realer and closer to becoming a thing. So and along the way we're working on other projects for other people's IPs, and and doing whatever we can just to kind of like keep the momentum going in the studio. But incredibly excited about what we want to do with Boonsinger. Just sort of, I guess a good way to describe it is we want to kind of create like anime for a Western audience, in 3D. I mean, Arcane, came out recently, which was like good and bad, because we'd sort of been doing, like, our thing was kind of like Arcane, and then it came out and we're like, oh man, this, like, our thing's not going to be unique anymore, because it was literally like that's sort of what we were doing. And then, but what's cool is like it just went number one for so long, and there's so many people that loved it, and I think that's just going to mean there's like more and more of this content that's coming out, and the audience is like, I say maturing in a sort of weird way. It's like, but there's more mature people watching animation.
More people with the money.
So it's like, I sort of think about myself, I'm at a particular age bracket, which is significantly older than my students. And, and I think I was sort of, kind of the age demographic where animation was just sort of starting to become a thing when I was, 17, 18, 19, anime was, I remember getting, pirated copies of Ninja Scroll and stuff, and, watching that without my mum knowing, and all of those types of things. But that was only a small group of people that were doing that, and now it's such a mainstream thing, right? It's anime's just gotten huge, and animation, and Disney going from 2D into 3D, and Pixar, and all those people were kids when that stuff came out, but now they're 40, 50 years old, and now people want to see adult orientated animation, which is super cool. And I just think it's going to happen more and more, and become more and more mainstream. And I think, like with Arcane, it's like it can't really become any more mainstream. It just is now, right? It's just just kind of a thing. So it's a really exciting time. And once again, I think it's a really exciting time for content creation. Just people being able to do stuff that they kind of are interested in and want to do, and there's different platforms to launch stuff and release it and get your ideas off the ground, which is like, super cool. Certainly, like, I totally wouldn't recommend the way that we're doing it to other people. It's like, literally the hardest way to do it. Like, let's just try and make an animation studio of 200 people and get like a Netflix deal. And that's not not just something that you can just do by yourself. But are there other ways to, get stuff off the, doing YouTube, shorts, and all sorts of things. There's so many different ways you can do things now, which is really cool, that can gain you notoriety, and maybe not work on that project in full, but it will like launch you into other things that you can, start doing. And we've seen people, like the games that you guys are working on, and things like Hollow Knight and all that kind of stuff. It's just super cool.
Huge.
It's really, really exciting. I think where the industry is kind of going, not necessarily just from a viewer standpoint, but I think from a creator standpoint, it's really exciting. Yeah,
I
It's
saw,
definitely.
I was going to quickly add. I saw there was a job. There's been a few jobs that pop up from CDW Animation. What's it been like attracting talent? Like, especially when you want to get to like such a huge number of people and do a lot of like kind of huge projects. What's it been like? Have there been any challenges like getting talent in, or you've obviously got the school there as well that you can kind of tap into.
Yeah, it's been actually kind of like really quite humbling. Whenever we do post up a job opportunity, the width and breadth of people we get applying for the roles is kind of insane. Yeah, it's just we get like the best people in the world applying. Like it's actually nuts. We had like we wanted a head of animation, and we didn't employ him because we had somebody else, but we had the guy that basically was in charge of the Better Human project for Epic Games. Like he applied for the job. Like what?
Wow.
What? He's like, yeah, Adelaide sounds really great. I used to live in Adelaide for a couple of years and worked at Rising Sun Pictures like way back in the day and stuff. And so yeah, it's which also makes it kind of scary for students, recent graduates wanting to apply, that you're sort of up against people like that. But it's exciting that people want to come to Adelaide and kind of and do this stuff, which is really cool. But yeah, we generally don't have too much of a problem with finding people. It's more about just selecting the right person.
Nice.
And when you mentioning metahumans, when Epic launched Unreal Engine 5, Moonsinger was like the first project I thought of, because that was the first time I'd seen they talked about like a series being in a real-time engine, like on Unreal Engine. Has there been a shift to that, like because of like Nanite and Lumen and all these cool things that would seem perfect for an arcane like series?
Yeah, it's interesting. We're actually kind of lately we've been moving away from the Unreal Engine a bit, just because of how we want to do things. But we're kind of like more using like a multitude of softwares, right, rather than just kind of one. I think that it's really interesting. It's like I'm not quite sure how the game engine stuff is going to go. Like there's a lot of things like the Mandalorian, where they're almost making I don't know if they are. I don't think they are. I think they upsell that a lot more than actually happens, right? But doing stuff on virtual stages and things. I think once again it's sort of like irrelevant what the software is. It's more just like the technique. I think that there's going to be much more real time stuff. And doing things like in UE5 or whatever, where it's like, I guess it's just this real time solution to. It's just because computers are getting faster, right? It's just So I think with whatever project you're doing, you just got to work out the right way to kind of put it together and not stress too much about what the software is. And we've had moments where we've had it's like, oh, we can't do this because we're doing it in UE4, and it's like, oh, well, could we just do this one bit that's not in UE4 and just So you got to it's like anything. It's like being a tradie. You got to use a hammer and a spanner and a whatever tool is right for the job. But once again, I just think it's incredibly exciting, like where the tech is going. It's moving at a super fast rate. It's kind of like, as you get older, it gets kind of scary because it's just like, oh my God, it's moving so fast, and where's it going to kind of get to? But the bar just keeps like getting higher and higher and just keeps pushing. And I think with all the AI stuff that's sort of coming out, it's just going to push the bar just even higher, right? Well,
it's funny you mentioned that, because we were talking about AI in video games a couple nights ago for the podcast, and we're having a bit of a chat, bit of a debate about how it's going to exist, and do we want it to be to be a part of it. And I'd love to get your opinion on where you think AI will play a role in. Let's make it even broader, not just game development, but like visual. VFX as a whole, because we're seeing it, in forms of tools already, like texturing and things like that, and script writing. But then when it starts replacing it seems to me that the end goal, due to this article of brain cells playing Pong. The end game is to have them basically complete the whole thing, like make a real insular. They make the game. They produce the art, like the computer, the AI, and it's all in there. And as someone who lives and breathes art, what do you take from that?
I think it's really interesting. So I was talking to students about this the other day. Is that every time we've had a lot of history of these things happening. So in the 1800s, we were all using oil paints and painting this way, and then in the 1900s, we had this thing called photography that came in, and photography was going to kill art forever. And yeah, there was certainly a lot of people that probably lost their career because photography came in and they were illustrating ads in magazines and all this kind of stuff. And then, photos happened and they weren't doing that anymore. But however, the good people, they still kept their jobs and they still did really well and they still did their thing, and then we kind of, I distinctly remember when, kind of like this using photos in your like concept art, when that happened, right? Huge uproar, like everyone's just going to use photos and no one's going to paint anymore and we're just going to all make the same stuff and blah, 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 right? And then, 12 months later, no one gives a shit anymore and we just, everyone uses photos in their art and away you go, right? Mm. And then people started using like 3D in their art. So people started using, Blender and stuff and 3D in their art and their concepts and like, oh man, this is an abomination. We shouldn't. Yeah, actually, let's go one step further back. So before photo bashing and 3D. So I remember when it was really frowned upon that you used a computer to make your art at all. So, right, you're doing stuff in Photoshop. And like people would say to me, yeah, but the computer just does it all. And I'm like, what you talking about? Right? I'd show them like a Craig Mullins painting. They're like, oh, yeah, but the computer just did it. It's like what? Yeah. So and so then photo bashing came in, and then 3Ds come in, and now people are making concepts with 3D and mixing all stuff and all that type of thing, and that was going to be the end of art, and then AI is coming in, and everyone's uproar, and it's going to be the end of art and all that kind of stuff. And I just always think these things are going to be used as a tool. Right, they're just going to be used as a tool, and the thing that is probably changed. So here's the thing: is that each sort of big shift that's happened, what's happening is those shifts are getting closer and closer together now. So we had like oil painting, traditional painting. Then we had like photography, and then we had the computers coming in, and then we had being able to use photos on your computer, and then sort of being able to use like 3D. To combine with 2D and all that kind of stuff, right? So each of these things is getting closer and closer together, like these big turning points. And I think that's the thing that kind of scares people a bit, because it does seem that the AI stuff is moving really freaking fast. Like every week there's something new that can. I mean, now you can type in prompts and it makes videos, right? Like all this, it's like, oh my god, what is happening? And there's all sorts of these things like around copyright and how that's going to work. Like they'll figure, we'll figure all this stuff out, and I think that it will still always be used as a tool. And is it going to take over jobs and things like that? Yep, probably. All of these things have, right? But the good people learn how to like shift and adjust, and learn how to control the thing to do what it is that you want to do. And if you can design and think creatively, I think that's the important kind of stuff, So, yeah, I mean, will AI do more and more and just end up, taking over humans? Like, yeah, I mean, it might, right? It might. Yeah, there's certainly an option. But hopefully it sort of like, won't get to that point where, it's just we're sort of controlling that tool rather than the AI controlling what we're doing. So I think that's the thing to kind of to keep in mind.
It kind of ties into your other point that you said earlier of like you just have to keep learning, and everyone in that kind of space is just constantly learning, right? So when it's a new tool, you just learn how to utilize that tool. Otherwise, you get left behind in a way.
Yeah, 100%. And I already see it now, right? Like you get, I see someone that's like, 17 years old or whatever, and they type in a prompt into AI, and then they post that up as like art they've done. And they're like, oh, this is awesome. And you look and you're like, oh, yeah, okay. But then you might have someone who's been like in the industry for 30 years at the top of the game, and they do some AI thing and type in the prompt or whatever, and it looks completely different. It looks completely different to like what the person with no experience does as the person who's like really in control of their tool set, right, and their skill set. And to me, that's the thing, right? Is like someone who knows what they're doing is going to make it look better. Someone who doesn't know what they're doing, it still looks like ass, right? It still doesn't look good. But someone who really knows what they're doing, they can control it, and they can even to the point of like, just it sounds kind of stupid, but like typing in the right prompts. But that's actually like looking at the thing that you're getting and having a trained eye to be able to like control the composition in the way you want. It's like you have to know how to do composition to be able to do that, if that makes sense. So, but what's scary with all these things is like, and I do see it with photos and 3D and stuff, is like sometimes what happens is people forget to worry about the fundamentals, and then they just go straight into the like kind of, I call it the sprinkles on the ice cream. They go into that bit, and if they don't have the fundamentals, then they can never get to where that guy is controlling the AI art, making something really cool, right? You can't get to that point easily. It's because that person has all of the fundamental art principles like ingrained and drilled into them that they're able to do that. So it is, I think there's always going to be a place for like just learning that fundamental of 3D modeling, 3D animation, 2D art, whatever it is. You got to learn that base to be able to get really good at the more technical, kind of tricky stuff. So yeah.
And does that learning that kind of base, like it's kind of like all flash no substance, is that like understanding the history and kind of going from like, like understanding where we've come from to get to that point?
Yeah, 100%. And it's once again is stuff that comes with experience, and you can't always like jump into that stuff. There's a Australian artist, a famous artist called Arthur Streeton, and once again, this is another stupid story that I tell students. But when I was in year 12, I had to do my art, theory thing on this artist called Arthur Streeton, and I hated it. I was like, who is this guy painting all these landscape, blah, blah, blah. I just want to be drawing orcs and Warhammer characters and, all this kind of stuff, right? Because that's what I was into. And the crazy thing is that Arthur Streeton's one of my favorite artists now. So, yeah, like when I go to Sydney, I always go to the gallery and there's a whole section for Arthur Streeton. I go and check it out. There's a couple of his paintings that are amazing, right? But when I was like 17, I didn't, I wasn't connected with how all of that works and how those guys laid the foundation for what we're doing now, right? And it's kind of it's really important to kind of like study that and learn who those like traditional artists were, how all of that worked, because it feeds into like how we're doing stuff now, right? But sometimes you have to, it takes a bit of experience to like understand how all that stuff connects together, and you just build your taste over time, right? Your taste changes, and I think in general your taste gets better over time, right? What you like and why you like it, and how it all kind of fits together.
Yeah, absolutely. So wrapping up, what's the what do you see as next for CDW? So you got New South you got Sydney and Melbourne studios opening up. Is there a part of the art pipeline that you're like CDW needs still yet to tap into that you want to see?
I think and we're starting to do it a bit more, which is really linking with some industry partners. There is a lot more studios in Australia now. There's some of them are getting really big, and we really want to link in with those guys just to create like pathways for students. So that's something that we're really looking at doing. If you asked me this time last year, I wouldn't have even mentioned Melbourne and Sydney. It wasn't something that I was thinking about. So I think for me right now, that's quite a new thing, and just trying to build that up and see how that works, and try to create something really cool. Having multiple campuses, I don't quite know what that's going to bring just yet, if that makes sense. I think that as we build that, it's going to bring some really unique opportunities to to whether it's studio, whether it's students, whether it's IP stuff we're doing. I'm not sure, but I'm really excited about where that's kind of heading. But don't really have the answers yet of what of what it's going to do.
Yeah.
But but we'll see how it goes. But I think there's enough. There's certainly enough demand in this, in the kind of creative space for us to expand over there and try and teach a whole bunch of New South Wales and Victorian kids how to do this stuff.
Yeah. And something completely forgot to mention, just over the top of my head, was the rookies, and what that's done for CDW and Flinders. Is you got back there #1 illustrator in the world. Illustration school.
Yeah,
that's got to feel amazing.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. Yeah, definitely. A few years ago, so it's been a number of years that students have been entering those competitions, and the rookies has grown as a competition as well, which is really cool. And I'm really on the same page with the two guys that run it, Alwyn and Macca. They're doing an awesome job for the industry and trying to help students link in with studios and get jobs and things like that. So there's some really incredible people and opportunities around the place now that are really trying to help everyone out to make the industry kind of bigger and better and all that kind of stuff, which is great. But yeah, now the rookies, the competition is fierce, and especially in the concept art area, I feel like we had a bit to do with that, where we kind of we're #1 school 2 years in a row, and then everyone else is like, we're coming for you, Simon. So now the competition for that category is bloody. I think that's the hardest. It's definitely the hardest category in the rookies competition, because all the schools that are entering that stuff. The work I see is oh man, these kids are really freaking good.
Yeah.
So
is there a CDW games maybe in the works somewhere in the future on the roadmap?
Oh, for sure. That's definitely something that we would like to do. I mean, we've definitely sort of kicked around the idea of launching a Moonsinger game along with the TV series and stuff. And that was sort of the because we were making it in UE4, and it sort of has that sort of similar pipeline and stuff. So there's definitely things that we're kind of that we're definitely into. We have the studio and the guys that can just sort of change sort of scope and kind of work and move in that area, which is cool. But it's I don't know, so many things to do, so many projects. You guys are probably the same, right? It's all these ideas. There's only so many that you can do.
Right.
That you can
absolutely.
execute properly. But but we'll see.
Awesome.
Yeah. And if you could leave us with one piece of advice to aspiring artists, young or old, trying to get into this, trying to get a job, or what would you leave us with?
I think just be just be really passionate about what you do. Just don't stop learning, and don't let anyone tell you no. A lot of people no one really told me no, but they were like, "Is this a good idea?" And I was just like, "Yes." So sometimes just really if you really want to do something and you're really you're not lying to yourself, you're actually going to push and make that work, right? You can do it. You can do it. I just see it all the time. So just it's not so much don't let anyone tell you no, but just be really passionate and have that. Learn to build that drive to be able to do what you want to do, and then you'll get to where you want to go. So, yeah.
Well, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Simon.
No worries. Thanks for having me.